Okay. Hey, folks, this is Brian. We have an Elderath campaign diary to share. Um, so, the party is in Hamlet, and they're getting ready to go into the swamp and help Sir Michael and his paladins recover the cauldron artifact. And it's going to be a couple days before they leave. And so, West gets inundated with squires with requests from their knights on stuff and prepping up. So Wes is kind of in charge of the encampment that we're going to be making at the crossroads. And from there, the paladins will go south to the temple. It's decided there are going to be 5 men-at-arms and 1 paladin that will be left with the party at the crossroads encampment, keeping it a safe place for the paladins to come back to, kind of thing. In traveling out, there's 20 paladins and with their knights and squires, and they are an advanced guard kind of thing. They're going to sweep through the roadway, and eventually when we get to the swamp, they'll be ahead of us to clear out the moat house and that kind of thing. Make sure it's all safe for us and the baggage train and else to come along. They'll be a couple hours ahead of us. But that's all planning. Meanwhile, Alexander asked the druid if there's anything that he can help with. The druid says that they've got folks east of the village that were, their stuff was rampaged by the skeletons. He's going to head out there to help do repairs and stuff. So Alexander's going to go with him. And in fact, Alvis says he wants to help out too. So they're heading out that way. Raymond and Tindo are making sure the gypsies have their spot to come back to and helping facilitate that. And then afterwards with the church, they'll be going through the triage areas and helping people heal and that kind of thing. Next day, there are reports of undead still out there, but they're just kind of wandering around aimlessly. And the day after that is when the paladins head off to the swamp, and then we and our group of the baggage train follow and trace. There was a baggage train that came up from the bridge area with all these knights and paladins stuff. So we've got stuff. It takes 2 days. It takes 2 days to get from Hamlet to the staging safe area encampment just outside the swamp up on a bluff. So we all get there to the bluff. We secure the campsite, and then we have discussions with Sir Michael about various things, about the goblins of the mountains, and that kind of led to the fact that we ran into an Etin, and he mentions that they had killed an Etin, and that led to discussions about that female. Her name's Jane, by the way. And the necromancer goblin and the warg riders and the dwarven complex and the secret door and the Minox silver and the wagon. All this stuff starts spilling out of things that Sir Michael did not know about, but now does. But in the process of doing that, there's a discussion about, what Jane's piece in all this was. And somebody mentioned about her escaping. I'm going, escaping? I don't think she was ever captured. West doesn't think she was ever captured. And so, there were how many bodies? 4 bodies. How many sets of manacles? 5. So maybe in fact she was captured and did in fact escape during, while we were there messing things around. In which case that silver was hers, and when she went back to the wagon, it wasn't there. In a rage, just burned everything. Although she could have burned it for some other reason too. But things are starting to come together a little better now. This whole goblin ambush on these poor woodsman was simply an accident. They ran into a goblin ambush that she was using the lumberjack guys to get somewhere for her. And I'm guessing it's getting back with the goblins because the goblins are in that area. And, that's where she ended up going, is that Goblin Valley is where she was going anyway. So that kind of clarifies a few things that were very mysterious going on. So next morning, Paladins take off a couple hours ahead of everybody else. They clear out the moat house. They get back to they get onto the crossroads, clear that area. We eventually get there, and Sir Michael asks if we ever come across bodies lying dead in the swamp. And we think, well, there's always the skeletal. Last time we came through, there were skeletal bodies everywhere laying down. And he says, no. And he says, they found 11 bodies here at the crossroads. And they're all laid out. And so we go looking at them and check their pockets kind of thing. They all have Minot printed coins. And there's a couple other things that were obvious up front. Well, they were armed and armored. They had been killed. They got puncture and slash marks all over, but their helmets all have like this melted spot on the top. And Raymond asks, "Yeah, fireball?" And was thinking, no, more like lightning. Brian asks the GM, "Hey, does Wes know anything about chain lightning?" Because that's what I'm thinking. Chain lightning, right? Burn them all up. But no, we kind of think, well, probably that's more of a lightning kind of thing. But that somehow got into a side tangent conversation about the alchemist lady in the underkeep at the moat house. And that got Sir Michael's attention going, now that's got to be some illegal activity. We're going to have to investigate that. So Sir Michael puts Wes in charge of taking care of the bodies, get it detailed together. Okay, guys, we're the detail. Get together. Come on, let's take care of the bodies. But the fact of us doing that, we then were rifling through these guys. There's some equipment that's salvageable, but we're looking for intel. Did they have any notes, any writing? Was there any sort of tattoos that were consistent among them all? That kind of thing, trying to figure out who these guys were. Also, they have facial features that are different from the ethnicity here in the Southern Colony. So they're from somewhere else. We do notice, though, that on their right bicep, they all have this black flag. Now, black flag doesn't mean anything to, I don't think, anybody here. But and there are other, military-style markings, that kind of tattoos on them, that kind of thing. But because of that, these guys look like they were serious campaigners. They had been mercenaries or army professionals for a long time, kind of deal. And we don't recognize anything else about these guys. The next morning, Wes reports to Sir Michael, "Hey, we found these tattoos. These guys all on the right by some of these black flag tattoos. I mean, anything to you?" And he just looked. He didn't recognize anything about it either. He goes, "Well, maybe they're all dock workers. See, they got these anchor tattoos too." Wes goes, "What? Oh, come on." The GM did said that even paladins fumble sometimes. So we all see the paladins off. There's one paladin left behind. He looks pissed. He goes off to his tent to sulk. And Ron comes up to us and says, "You really should check on that paladin." And Wes goes, "He's palading because all the paladins want to go and go fight." And this reaction makes perfect sense to Wes. We go, "What are you talking about?" And Ron actually gets kind of testy with him, says, "Go and check him out." And then he wanders off, gets lost in a group of people, and disappears for a while. Wes kind of puts that out of his mind, goes back doing camp stuff, and after a while goes, "Okay, let's go check on the paladin," right? Well, while this is all going on, Runt sneaks into the paladin's tent. Waits till the paladin is asleep, taking a nap or whatever, because lots of guys are doing this because it's going to be a long few days with watches and all kinds of stuff. So lots of guys are racking out. And looks around. I think he spotted a couple things, but might also don't really mention that. And then he ends up buckling the paladin's boots together. Something like that. And sneak out. And as he's sneaking out is when Wes is looking for him, and he and Alvis see him come out from underneath the paladin's pavilion wall thing. And Wes grabs him by the collar, drags him up. He's like, "What are you doing?" "I don't trust him." "Well, they obviously can't trust us either, right? With us doing these kinds of things, trust goes both ways. What's going on?" And he says, "We need to dig up the bodies. We need to show you something." And so it's now getting towards evening time. Wes and Raymond had discussed, we need to really the paladin feel like he's in charge at least. So Wes goes up to the paladin squire and says, "Hey, we want to coordinate with the paladin. Meal times. Is this, whatever. The paladin, the squire is shocked. And this is where some of the politics come involved again. It happens on occasion throughout this session, plus previous sessions as well, because Wes's family is high level, or he's related to people that are high level, that kind of thing. Well, he's a cousin to the lady Tamara, who's the lady of Bloodstone. She's essentially the queen down here, kind of thing. So the higher ups are friendly with him generally. I haven't seen anybody being nasty with him yet, but then he hasn't really been in Telgar much. But then the lower level guys are like, yeah, you're one of them, kind of thing. But Wes is kind of talking with the squire, hey, out here, I'm just one of the party. And pat him on the shoulder, kind of thing. And the guy kind of goes, oh, interesting. Okay, this guy's different. But while that's going on, they're talking about what they need to do. So after dinner, Wes is going to distract the paladin with discussions on the night schedule and watches and all that kind of stuff while they exhume one of the bodies. And then after that's done, Wes is going to go and hook up back with the party and what's going on. So while Wes is distracting the paladin, the party's going through and Runt's explaining all this kind of stuff. Apparently Runt was part of some like Assassin's Guild or something. And it looks like this group of guys were all assassins. They were paid to come and kill somebody. And that he thinks that this whole thing of these 11 bodies is staged. It's all a setup because you can tell that these wounds were inflicted after these guys were dead. Runt thinks that the paladins stabbed all the bodies. And so he's with this whole Burns thing happening back in Hamlet, and he's not trusting anybody. I think he's overly paranoid. I can understand a little paranoid, but this is over the board stuff. So it wasn't the black flag tattoo, but there were other tattoos that he recognized that were similar to his assassin's tattoo and that kind of thing, right? So that evening, Wes is talking to the paladin and asks him, okay, from what did they find when they got here? And he was on the back side of the paladins getting there. The bodies of these guys apparently have been piled up in the center of the crossroads, like they were just dumped there. That was not passed earlier to us. And so we're going, okay, that doesn't change anything, but it adds more information. And we're afraid that these bodies are going to come back alive as zombies or something. So Raymond actually stakes one. Or is that later? Either this time or later on, he'll have stake one of them. But we put a specific watch on the cemetery where we buried these guys. At night, we can't see the green glow to the south. That's from the temple. But there's somebody on watch. I think it was Alexander. And he sees a couple of green orbs. And Brian is thinking, giant frogs, right? Eyes reflecting. But then there's another pair and another pair. And at that, Alexander's going, okay, we got some problems. He starts calling the alarm. We all get up. It turns out they're skeletons. There's skeletons all around us, coming at us from all directions. And we do a little battle style simulation thing where the GM asks us, make 3 percentile rolls, and based upon those, he'll give us a certain amount of damage and give us certain check marks back and that kind of stuff, right? Which reminds me, live play is in the description. But you'll get to the last half hour or so is just us rolling check marks and just chatting. So you can just, once we start talking about making check marks, you can just stop watching. It's not necessary. But I forgot to turn off the recording. Okay, so we're fighting skeletons, and behind the skeletons, shock bolts are being shot out from the swamp into the skeletons. And these shock bolts are strong enough to kill a skeleton every time. So the skeleton's got about 12 hit points. Shock bolts do a D4. So we're talking about, you know, overloaded by 5 magic points, each one of these shock bolts. 6-point shock bolts. That's a lot of mana, or magic points, or whatever you want to call it, being just thrown about, because they're skeleton after skeleton after skeleton. The group to the northeast has 2 sets of shock bolts coming out. There's a group to the southeast and a group to the southwest. The southeast group has just 1, shock bolt coming out. But eventually all skeletons are killed, and the northeast group is pretty much on the road at this point. We see a torch. Yeah, these guys didn't have any light either. They light up a torch, and it's handed to a woman who's got her hands bound, and then she's pushed forward. There's an old crippled guy behind her with a cane kind of thing, keeps pushing her forward. And she's coming forward, and she starts asking us questions and something we don't understand. Although it turns out, she was speaking Norse initially. So we recognized it was Norse. Raymond actually speaks Norse. We don't. I speak Latin, or Wes speaks Latin, but other than English, I guess, is the common language here. The paladin kind of comes up and interposes himself. He's in charge. He's going, what's going on. Wes kind of comes up as a backup to support him. So there's this middle-aged woman, their hands bound, holding a torch on the road coming towards us with this hobbling old man behind her. Wes does notice these guys behind the old. There's the woman, the crippled man, and then guys. And these guys have crossbows. These guys are wearing lamellar. And lamellar is a style of armor that is rare. It's not seen on this part of the continent at all. So these guys are from somewhere else. Also, they have a flag, but we couldn't really see what it was like or what it was about. So her clothes are all ragged, and the man behind her speaks to her, and then she speaks in Norse to us. Pokes her in the back. She's looking terrified, so she tries another language which we don't understand. At that, Raymond kind of comes up and he says, "Speak slowly. I can understand you." And he did that in Norse, and so there's some conversation back and forth with her acting as a interpreter between us and the guys behind her, and then Raymond acted as interpreter with us and the woman kind of thing. So that's okay. Where's Telgar? Telgar's to the east. No, to the west. Telgar's to the west. I need to correct that in my thing. Sorry about that. So, and Wes can hear guys behind talking, and words that do pop up the records like Telgar and Oban. He recognized both those words. And then the old man pokes the woman. She says, "Are you the leader of the company?" Talking to the paladin. And her Norse is accented, so she's not from the southern colonies like we are. And the paladin steps forward again and says, "Yes, I am the leader." And they feather him with crossbow bolts. At that, Wes freaks. He casts a sudden light, which hits some kind of magical defense and fizzles out. He dives for cover, and he's getting ready to cast Lord Sleep, overpowered with 2 more magic points. To try to get through, put him down, at least a crossbow movement behind him. Not really thinking that there are 2 other groups of these guys out there. Let's just think about this one group. But while that's going on, the woman gets poked back. "Do not do that again if you don't want to see anyone else die." And she says they're asking where Oban is. And Oban, Wes would know. Brian checked the map to make sure. Because Oban is one of the cities on the west coast. It's the southernmost city on the coast in the map. You'll see that on the thing, because I'll pull the map up on the screen capture. And Brian knows about Oban because it is a pirate capital that a previous character of his was a pirate princess from there. She was a cleric assassin. Yeah, she was bad news. But anyway, so the hobbling man, after we say that where Oban is, turns around and goes back to his guys, and they're all talking. The woman's kind of standing there, and she looks back at those guys behind her, and she takes a step forward towards us, and she looks back and takes another step towards us, and then she runs for our line. The guys seem to not care about that, so we get the woman behind us, and then these guys in the swamp take off to the southwest, move to the swamp without light, and not being encumbered by the terrain. Yeah, some very, very powerful magic going on here. Raymond's talking with the woman, find out she's from Minok. She was captured 3 days ago and put on this gigantic ship. She's the size of a village. And they were attacked by a storm. Now, actually, I've got this in the notes, but Raymond and Wes one evening saw a storm out over the inlet with lightning and stuff happening out there. Apparently, the storm is what sunk their ship. And there was some kind of a battle of mages. There's one flying in the sky, Valor maybe. These folks did have tattoos, and most of them did have that black flag tattoo. So we reorganized with the squires, new sets of watches, increase our coverage, that kind of thing. Tindo and Raymond prep the paladin's body, take the arrows out and stuff, and there's some kind of preservation spell, I think, that keeps the soul in the area kind of thing, so they can raise him later. And so he cast that on him. The next day, Raymond, again, talking with the woman, finds that she was taken from a farm on the coast near Minok. And there were others that were captured. The ship was destroyed. The group that she was with landed east of the swamp, where they encountered a group of men-at-arms. East of the swamp on the road. Big fight there, but the men-at-arms group was just massacred, mostly due to the magics that these guys employ. She knew of 3 magic users. The most powerful one was that short, wounded guy, or was the one that was behind her at the time. But he was not in charge. It was somebody else in charge. She couldn't understand anything they were saying, but that one magic user made her understand him. It got into her mind, kind of thing. She doesn't really want to avoid Telgar, and they were headed to Oban, but they were in fact running from something. Something was trying to destroy them. And that something is something that magic user was definitely afraid of. She doesn't want to go back to Minok. She wants to go to Telgar. So calm her down. We're not going to send you back to Minok, but we don't really know about getting her to Telgar now. We can get her to Almond, right? That kind of thing. Next day, morning comes and goes. Evening approaches, uneventful. We're hearing frogs in the swamp for the first time this night. That evening, we noticed that the captured woman is attempting to be helpful and useful around camp, doing things. The next day, Tindo again casts that preservation on the paladin's corpse, and then we, the party, decide, okay, we're going to head south. The paladins should have been back by now, but they're not. So we need to go and investigate and see what happened there, or at least get some kind of clue of what happened. If they got completely massacred, we need to know that so we can send word back. And so we mount up and we head south. The woman kind of, where are you going? Where are you going? We're just going to go check on our folks. We're coming back. You're not going to Minok. Don't worry about that. We'll be back in a little bit. At the latest, 2 days, a day south and a day back kind of thing. So, but anyway, on our way south, we run into Sir Michael and the Paladins. None of them are mounted. And they have a Travois, the dragon, that's got the artifact cauldron on it. And he's waving at us and points off to the east. And we look, and there's this black dragon flying out. We had an encounter with black dragon previously. And there was a little boy that nobody knew and nobody saw that talked to Wes, who had jet black hair, and metagaming in the related worlds we've played in before. Dragons take human form all the time, right? Just to check things out and see what's going on and not have people be afraid of them. But Wes knows there's a black dragon out here that is in fact a little boy. And so he's thinking maybe this is it, but this dragon is flying at us. And so we rush up, get with the paladins. The paladins got magical protections. The dragon breathes acid all over us, but the protections protect us. Dragon's flying around, looking a little pissy. We hooked the Travois up to an actual horse now, so we can move much faster. But as we're going back north, we find trees that have been knocked over on the pathways. We got to hook some horses up, drag them out of the way, that kind of thing, and continue on. So for some reason, the dragon's trying to at least slow us down, but we don't know why. We get back to the Crossroads camp. Oh, forgot to mention that during these days that the paladins didn't show up, we kept the squires and the men-at-arms busy when they weren't on watch or sleeping with building fortifications, little fences and stuff, right? All about and around and making fun of the points, that kind of stuff. In fact, at one point we started to build a small tower, just so we can't see further. Also, Alexander had a couple nights ago, headed down south, find a tree, climb up, take a look around, that kind of thing. There are some frogs, but they got away. So when we get back to camp, we spend some more time with Sir Michael, describing, the skeletal attacks and the other army and that kind of stuff. And here's the woman, and they get a chance to talk. A bunch of the paladins want to go out and hunt down the dragon, but Sir Michael puts a stop to that. No, we got to get the artifact back to Telgar. So he's talking with a woman. He's particularly interested in the encounter that the army from the boat had with the men-at-arms army on the road. Size of the forces, that kind of thing. He also has concerns about the fact that these newcomers didn't have any trouble moving through the swamp. Apparently they had seen them. They crossed paths at one point as they were coming up. Didn't get a lot of detail about that. Alexander does mention to Sir Michael that these new folks were headed towards Oban. And, the woman was telling about this terrible thing they were fleeing and had been for some time. So the next day, we head west. We send some scouts out ahead to get more horses and another wagon. So we asked Sir Michael about his story and his encounter. Oh, it turns out Rufus and Burns are here. They had both been captured. And Sir Michael tells us that the temple was interesting, ancient, and that was surprising it had been turned into a prison. It had been left over from the wars when they were chasing down Forg's minions, and one of his lieutenants was imprisoned down here. It seems that someone had been trying to release it, and the barriers to the prison had been weakened, and that there was an it that appears to be able to summon things from the void and from beyond the pale. And those words mean things specifically to Brian the player, because those words apply to certain demons and certain systems that we have played with in the past. They have demons beyond the pale and demons of the void. That means certain power levels, right? But the temple sanctuary has been all defiled. The dome has further collapsed down. They were able to secure a few artifacts of interest. However, the entire thing was quite horrific, as Sir Michael said. More comments. The color itself reeks, even if it's covered up. The smell of death permeates everything, and it's really nasty. Burns does relate to us that as he was returning from Telgar, he was ambushed by something on a carpet that howled incessantly. And that this creature was using Burns' strength to weaken the barriers around the prison. Rufus doesn't remember anything, not even giving us the silver coins. 2 days later, we arrive back in Hamlet. The paladins and guards are sent ahead to Telgar with the cauldron, but Sir Michael stays for a time here in Hamlet. We have a couple days of downtime, during which we continue with helping things out. On Veldor, which is the 5th day of week 3 of the 7th month, I forgot what it's called. We get a summons from Sir Michael to the tower. So we get to the tower. Sir Michael's there. Rufus is there. Burns is there. Sir Michael's little retinue is there. The tower is preparing a celebratory feast for the success of the mission, the return of the paladins. And that night, there's a retelling of the tale. After things calm down a bit, Sir Michael tells us he has gifts to bestow. So he's wandering around quietly speaking to folk, handing out gifts and stuff. When he gets to us, he tells us that both Rufus and Burns are going to return with him to Telgar, where they can recover. That will leave a vacancy here in the tower. That Lady Tamara will want to keep filled with an acting Castilian until Rufus and Burns can return. Until that time, the village elder is in charge. Roger. So, gifts to the party. He gives Alvis a silvered steel longsword. Apparently, silver can be effective against undead and, as everybody knows, against werewolves. And talking with Alexander, his desire to be one of Kirk's rangers, he really wants to give Alexander this bow, but he also has some armor or even maybe a sword. And Alexander's not really sure, so he's thinking about it. To Raymond, he gives a scroll that came from that library. To Tindo, with his efforts to preserve Sir Justin, that was the paladin that was killed. But by the way, by the time we got back, the preservation spell had already lapsed, so yeah, he's gone. Perhaps some knowledge for him or a scroll to help advance his efforts. And then he looks at it and goes, "Use a mace, don't you?" So I have this silvered heavy mace. How strong are you? So they do a little arm wrestle thing, test out her strength. And so she gets this silvered heavy mace. To Runt, he gives a small bag with sparklies in it. And Wes, where are you? How was your evening? Wes, little chat kind of stuff, because, they're not necessarily chummy, but Wes was squire to one of Sir Michael's knights. So they've already got a connection going. So he looks into a bag. He says, "Nah, you wouldn't be interested in." Nah. And then he calls one of his guys over and says, "I do have this." And one of his men hands me a package wrapped in paper. Wes probably should open it at the time, but he wanted to be polite on, not greedy. Thank you. Whatever's greatly appreciated. It turns out that it's an old, dusty book. So that night ends. The party actually, after Burns and Rufus go upstairs and Sir Michael, they kind of leave the area. The party gets hyping. We have a blast. Next day, which is Quain, the 6th day of week 3 of Tar, the 7th month. Next week, Wes gets to make his dexterity research increase roll. By the way, he missed his power gain roll from this last time, but now he knows, hold kind. That's the first thing he's going to do every time he can. And then we'll do some shock bolts and maybe a sleep and the shocking cloud if we need to. Keep all the spells up, right? Okay, so Rufus, Burns, Sir Michael, they all leave. The village elders left in charge, and the village continues to recover from the skeleton attack. Happy gaming.